If you're just getting into sewing, there are so many tools and gadgets that you could get. It can be quite overwhelming. But after sewing for about 10 years, probably a bit more, I can safely say that you don't need all the gadgets. Some of them are nice to have, but they're not all completely necessary. Here are my absolute must-haves if you're just getting into sewing and you want to know what it is you need right now. First up, you're going to need a sewing machine. Mine is a Janome 230 DC and is, I would say, a mid-range machine. You can definitely get slightly cheaper, more beginner range machines, or if you have someone in your family or a friend who has a machine that they're not really using very much, you could ask to borrow it before investing in a machine of your own. But whilst you can sew clothes by hand, it would be incredibly time consuming and you would probably be put off quite quickly. So I really recommend getting yourself a sewing machine. Next up, you are going to need an iron. In order to give your garments the most professional look possible, before you even start sewing, you need to wash your fabric and then you need to iron it to get all the creases out and make sure the fabric is as flat as can be before you start cutting out your pieces. Then once you have sewn a seam, you want to go ahead with your iron and open up your seam with the iron to give the seam a really clean and professional finish. Okay, I have my little toolbox. This is a prim box. There are loads of different sewing boxes that you can get, but this is my personal favorite because it's stackable. And let's see what we've got inside. Scissors. There are a few different types of scissors that are really useful. The first one, obviously, is a really good pair of dressmaking shears. These are my personal favorite and happen to be amongst the cheapest of the sewing scissors. These are from Fiskars. You can get these from any good haberdashery, hobbycraft. You can get more expensive scissors, but personally, these ones are my favorite. They are the lightest, so they're easier on your wrist as well. And they just, you can't go wrong. They work like a dream. Now, you also need paper scissors. Do not use fabric scissors to cut paper. You want special scissors just for your paper. Never the twain must cross. Next up, this isn't strictly necessary and it depends on the fabric that you are sewing with, but a pair of pinking shears are really useful. You're going to want to finish your seams. After you've sewn a seam, you need to finish the raw edges in order to stop them from fraying. Over time and wear and washes, the fabric will start to fray. There are a couple of different ways of finishing your seams. One is to get an overlocker, but that is an investment for the future. You can do a zigzag stitch, which is really useful, or if it's a cotton fabric or a denim or a jersey, something that doesn't fray too much, you can just finish the edges with some pinking scissors, which gives a zigzaggy edge. The last pair of scissors you want are some little snips for snipping your thread tails nice and close to the end of the seam stitching. Just a tiny little pair of snips are perfect. These are from Snipsters and they're really, really cute. Up next is a flexible tape measure, ideally one that has inches on one side and centimeters on the other. You need to use this for accurately measuring your body. Do not, if you're just getting into sewing, don't take the size that you think you are based on shop bought clothes. You want to measure yourself and put those measurements against the measurement charts on the back of your pattern. It will be vastly different to what's in the shop and every pattern company does it slightly differently. So you want a flexible tape measure so that you can measure yourself before you start a new pattern. This also comes in really handy for measuring up hems and things like that. But I do have a preferred tool for measuring hems. So my preferred tool for measuring hems is a sewing gauge like this one. This is from Merchant and Mills, but there are a couple of others that are similar. It has this red slider, so you can slide it along to whatever width you want your hem to be, and then you can butt the fabric up against the red slider, and you can get really accurate measurements this way. There are a few different types of sewing gauges, but this one is my favorite. It is never not in my sewing box. You are going to need pins. You are going to want pins so that you can pin your paper patterns to your fabric, so that you can pin seam allowances together before taking them to the sewing machine, so that you can pin your hem up before you take that to the sewing machine. These are worth investing a little bit more in. They're still not super expensive, but you can get some really cheap pins that are not great. They tend to be a bit blunt. They tend to be quite long and thick. They might be good for quilting or for thicker fabrics, but for dressmaking, these glass or plastic headed pins are perfect. They're nice and sharp, and they do the job for pretty much everything. Now, when you are cutting out your pattern pieces, you're going to need to find a way to do some marking, measuring, things like that. So you're going to want a range of marking tools, a pencil for making adjustments on your paper pattern. But for marking anything onto your actual fabric, there are a few different ways. You can get water erasable pens, you can get heat erasable pens, you can get proper old school tailor's chalk like this one, but my favorite is a chalk wheel. It has an infill of like chalk dust inside, and then it has this wheel that you turn, and you can get nice straight lines with that. So that's really good for marking things like darts, seam allowances if you want to, and then it just brushes away, so that's really handy to have. Now, if you're just getting started sewing, it's really important to remember that your body is completely unique and no one size fits all. That's why we sew our own clothes. You're going to want to make alterations to a fabric. You might want to add a bit of length, take a little bit of length away. You might want to grade from your bust to your hips, that kind of thing. So when you are making alterations to your paper pattern pieces and you need to stick extra paper down here or there, washi tape is the perfect thing. It doesn't stick really, really tight like sellotape might, so you can just gently peel it off if you make a mistake. Washi tape. I love, and it's really pretty as well, which is really helpful. Okay, we're nearly there. Next up, you want a couple of different types of sewing machine needles. The most popular, the most common one is a universal needle. They come in different sizes, from a 70 for finer fabrics up to a 90 for thicker fabrics. You can also get denim needles. You can get jersey or ballpoint needles, which are better for using with stretched fabrics. You can get super fine needles as well if you're sewing with like a silk or something really, really delicate. But to get you started, universal needles, ballpoint needles. That's pretty much all you're going to need to start off with. And finally, your best friend, your worst enemy, the thing you love to hate, the seam ripper. Mistakes happen. It doesn't matter how long you've been sewing for. If you are just starting out or if you've been sewing for a while, mistakes still happen. And it's really important to keep a seam ripper by your side when you are sewing. Yes, it's devastating, but it can soon be resolved with the help of this little guy. It has a little blade right in the middle so that you can pick up stitches and then cut them in order to open. And it has this longer tail so that you can pick the stitches up and pull them through the fabric. A seam ripper is very, very important. My mum always called them a quick unpick. So there you have it. That is my ultimate list of sewing tools for beginners. There are other things that you can get that will elevate your sewing practice, but for brand new beginners, these are the things that you really need. Let me know in the comments below if you think I have missed anything off the absolute essentials list. Pop them down below, and I will see you all again really soon.